Okay, we are recording with Madex. We're just meeting each other first time now, so I'm very grateful that you're doing this. You did not have to do this. It sounds like you're just back from Europe. I have listened to you on and off, I guess, over the last year or so. I just watched the Madex manifesto, and you're an interesting character. So, like, just to start, I don't even know how to frame this with you, but just to start, for those people who don't know you, who are listening to our podcast, because we have a lot of people who don't know you. Who are you? Like, how do you describe yourself? Like, what are you all about? And I'm going to ask you some questions, but who are you?
I'm a sovereign individual seeking sovereignty for a greater amount of people. And I'm a designer and creator. And I'm a part of a Bitcoin company that has international reach and working to push individualistic ideas into the world, and I jokingly say, make Ayn Rand cool again. So that's sort of my summary, I guess.
And when the Bitcoin company, that's Bull Bitcoin?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so, like, I'm curious to say you're a sovereign individual. To me, I read the Sovereign Individual, the book. Like, I feel like I read it in 2001 or 2000. I don't know when it came out. Like, I feel like I read it in 2002. And I remember putting it down and thinking, oh my gosh, like, that's like, I resonate with this book, but I didn't know what to do with it. Like, I just put the book down and I thought, this is something really powerful here. And I loved it, but I didn't know what to do with it. And then it seems like Bitcoin, everything that was said in the book seems to be evolving to have some sort of truth that's coming from that book. And Bitcoin kind of just marries with it perfectly. But how do you come to the point in life where you're speaking like, I'm a sovereign individual? Like, I don't get it. Like, where did you grow up? Like, what's your story? You're born where? In Alberta?
Alberta. I grew up in the woods, so on the edge of the mountains. And I was an only child, and so that stirred got my imagination all powered up. And growing up on like an acreage, most of my childhood was figuring out how to do things on my own, and kind of doing whatever I wanted, I guess, out in the wilderness. And yeah, my father was entrepreneurial, and he built a design company that did landscape and infrastructure projects. And so when I was young, I grew up kind of going around to all the different build sites and seeing everything that he was first drawing and then bringing into reality. And that sort of gave me the foundation for the work I'm doing now, which is seeing things in my mind and striving to bring them into reality by mastering skills, by finding other skilled people, and putting it all together. My dad was kind of a part of Ralph Klein's gang in Alberta.
Oh, got it. Wow.
So came from a very conservative household and was raised to distrust the government from a very young age. My mother grew up in Africa, so she had seen what all government promises have a potential of turning into. And so that combination just kind of primed me perfectly to set my own path. And once Bitcoin connected with me, it allowed me to take advantage of what Bitcoin offers and really kind of see what Bitcoin can change about the world and realize how important it is, and create an anchor to meaning in my life through the pursuit of this future where time is no longer stolen and people are valued for their contributions and their skills, and there is no longer a class of vampiric succubus creatures feeding off the work of producers.
I love it. So when did you stumble upon Bitcoin through this journey? Early? Like, how did this, so you have these thoughts, like I can see now with your background, I get it. I'm like, okay, conservative slant, independent thinker, critical thinker. Sounds like you're reading, trying to figure all this stuff, a lot of stuff out, meaning and purpose in life. And then at what point is Bitcoin something you stumble upon in some strange, like, how does that come to fruition? Is this through Francis? You guys cross, like, how does that work?
Well, I went to a technical school, and when I moved to do that, the roommate, I ended up just randomly from replying to a advertisement. The guy I ended up living with was a hardcore libertarian character who was extremely unplugged, and that would be my first sort of, I guess, Morpheus contact. And while I was going through school there, I was also learning skills. I was taking fashion design courses and business courses, and at the same time, working at a nightclub and wanting to not work at the nightclub and trying to build something that could produce capital. So I was investigating all kinds of stuff. And a friend of mine and I started working on a automated savings program that we wanted to patch into the big banks and sort of have the ability to tax yourself on your purchases and build a savings account without paying much attention to it over the year. And we got pretty far ahead with all of this work, but the major roadblock was the barriers to entry to deal with the banks, and also just the cost of entry. And so it became clear that we'd have to raise tens of millions of dollars to be able to actually do it. And I was young and just didn't know how to do that. So we kind of decided to just abandon the project. But at that time, when we were trying to figure it out, my roommate suggested that we build it on Bitcoin, more jokingly because nobody uses Bitcoin. But if one day they use it, it would be the perfect thing to build on it.
What year is this roughly? Like where are we in?
It would have been like 2012, 2013.
Oh my God. Wow. Got it.
And then there was a Bitcoin store in the town that I was in, which was one of the first in Canada. And just started to kind of explore Bitcoin. But of course, like everybody, and especially when you're young, you don't take it seriously enough at first.
I laugh when you're saying you're young because I feel like you're clearly still young. But yeah, that's just because I'm so old maybe that I think that you're really young. Yeah, but sorry, I cut you off. Keep going.
And you just don't really, like, Bitcoin is a teacher through pain, and many people hear stories about being early on Bitcoin and they wish that they had the opportunity to be early. But it was very easy to be early on Bitcoin. It was very difficult to not sell and to ride whatever early access you had to present day. Pretty much impossible. The only people I know who have had great success with that is when they discovered Bitcoin, they were already very rich. So the coins they bought, they never had to use, or they forgot about them, lost them, and somehow were able to gain access to them again later. But for everybody else, it's just pain and suffering. And if you don't respect the Bitcoins, which pretty much everybody in their first journey into Bitcoin will not respect the coins, it's a bad journey and a rough time. But once you go through sort of the forced education on Bitcoin and you earn the respect for the coins, then everything gets a lot better and starts to improve.
I'll never forget. I'm a big gold guy, and I'll never forget when I was like, 2017, it's a tulip bubble. And I laughed at it. And I remember dismissing it, like telling people, oh my gosh, we're going to start the Rockstar coin. How about we'll start the Rockstar coin? How about that? And I told my brother, and I think it was actually Nick, my brother's idea, maybe the Rockstar coin. And we're like, yeah, we should do that for jokes. We never did, but we just thought, yeah, like, what's this Bitcoin nonsense? And then it hit 17K or whatever it hit in US dollars. And then I remember, I think in 2018, I Googled it. I don't know why. I think it was like 6K. And I remember thinking, how the hell is this thing 6K? Like, why isn't it zero? Like you have that moment, you're like, I don't know, wait a second, it's still 6K. How is this thing 6K? But then I still just walked away from it. I had a couple other encounters with it until 2020. And that was my move where I realized how wrong I was. And when it hits you, it just hits you like a ton of bricks. Like I ran to my brother's office and told him, I was so wrong. I think I told him I screwed us. I go, oh my gosh, I totally screwed us. Like this, I should have looked at this thing a long time ago. We need to pay attention. So everybody goes through their journey. But so where does, when you go through this then, were you always creating art? Like you create some beautiful pieces. Like now I understand that you were in school for some of this stuff. When do you get to the point where you start creating, like, I feel like your art, is it intentionally connected to Bitcoin, or am I just viewing it that way incorrectly? Because I look at some of your pieces that I want to buy and I'm like, oh my gosh, especially like for me specifically, it's like the anonymous stuff, the stuff with the anonymous mouse. I don't know what it is. It's just like, that's the pieces that really connect with me. What is this an expression of your art?
Well, I was always making, just artistic creativity was always my strongest skill. When I was in elementary school, I got selected and pulled out of classes and sent to the university to do art classes at the university.
Oh, got it.
And then again went in high school. So I was always kind of pretty rolling ahead in art. And then as I was trying to do all this, I just never really believed, I guess, growing up in Alberta, there was not really much influence around me that was people who had been successful with creativity. The primary industries obviously being ranching and oil and construction and all that sort of stuff. So I just never really kind of took my natural talent seriously. And then it was kind of through, I guess, around that same time when I first discovered Bitcoin, I started kind of realizing some of the things that I was not good at. And somewhere I picked up that when you're trying to build success for yourself, that you should start with what you're the best at and build on that. So I was always kind of running like a art project / sort of clothing and design project on the side of everything else that I was trying to do. But I just never went all in on it because I just didn't believe that people would invest in it. Or I just knew how difficult, from studying the fashion industry, how difficult of a project it was. And I just didn't see a path to really making a successful life from it at that time. And then,
so when did that change? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And then it was always kind of running in the background, and I was experimenting with different things and getting involved in this and that. And then just a series of horrific entrepreneurial failures over and over again, leading to, this is where you get the best lessons, is through mistakes. And then finally, I just had a project that went totally wrong, and I realized that I had just did not have the skill to be trying to do venture projects and fuck around.
Oh, really? Okay.
And so and by that time, the art brand, with me putting almost no effort into it, had grown pretty well, and I had the opportunity to do some shows and do some events. And I decided, roughly around the time that I met Dave Bradley, Bitcoin brains, and shortly after Francis, that it was time to go all in on creativity and design, and I sort of saw a path to being able to build actually a successful business. And so, yeah, I just got focused instead of all over the place, and really focused on what I was good at. And that and then that was around the creation of Bull Bitcoin, which was Francis' company, which was really a rebrand of Francis' company beforehand, called Bills. And then we created the brand Bull Bitcoin together.
What year is that? So what year is that? Sorry, just for context.
That would have been 2018, and end of 2018. And I believe I think the official launch for Bull Bitcoin was sometime in 2019. I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to double check. But then we got rolling with that. And then I really owe a lot of everything I've been able to achieve to this point to Dave and Francis for setting that foundation with Bull, and for Francis creating such an incredible company, such a leader in engineering in the Bitcoin world, and just a really, really solid ethos and ethics, and being able to create the brand around that and create the visuals. And I say that Francis and his team built sort of the layout of a Ferrari, and then my job was to say, okay, the engine cover is going to be glass, and we're going to have this red top, and it's going to say Ferrari across it, and we're going to have all these shapes, and it's going to go. So that's sort of my role. And I just got lucky that the team that I ended up pairing with, Bull Bitcoin, just the talent and capabilities from an engineering standpoint were just so excellent that it really fit well with also my creative excellence, and the two went really well together. And then cut to today, we're finally an international company, and starting to make our way through Europe. And it's just the perfect platform for me to really highlight a lot of my design work. And then also like an excellent connect into the Bitcoin world. And then, of course, along this whole journey from the very beginning, all sorts of philosophies and ideas and concepts started to come to mind. And I just am naturally laid out to have an idea about the way things should be run and the way that a successful state should look and operate, and definitely an ability to identify and notice all the really horrible things that are happening today in the world, and the existing sort of nation state fiat powered monstrosity that we are able to somehow still find success in, but still without its problems, it would be a much better environment. And that's the environment that I'm seeking to build through Bull Bitcoin and through the art project and brand Madex.
Yeah, you don't, obviously you don't know me, but hearing you talk like this to me is very meaningful. So it's clear to me that you bumping into Francis, you said, use the word luck, it's clear to me that it wasn't luck. Like that was meant to come together the way you guys met. It just seems like the fit is too perfect. There is something there that obviously was meant to happen. For those people who don't know, what type of, I don't know how you carve up your day or weeks or months, but what kind of art do you create? Like I see your beautiful paintings and pictures. I don't even know how to describe them because there seems so much depth to them. But there's also I see clothing because my son, I was mentioning, walks around with one of your t-shirts on. And now is it jewelry as well? Can you just what are you creating?
Yeah.
And then I want to ask you about some life. I want to get some of your philosophy and some of the stuff that you have in your Madex manifesto video, but just for this, so everyone understands, what are you creating?
Well, I mean, I guess the anchor for the whole thing is large format paintings. That's the thing I enjoy creating the most. Unfortunately, it's also the most difficult thing to sell and distribute. Art,
because they're big. I didn't know how big some of some of the most beautiful ones. They're huge. They're beautiful. But sorry, keep going.
Yeah, art is the most difficult business in the world.
Yeah.
And for all the examples that we have of artists that do extremely well with these multi-million-dollar painting sales and all this kind of stuff, for the most part, all of that is fake. It's sort of a mechanism of fiat that has been really puffed up, and there's a whole drama and story around it. But the real purpose for it is just to obscure funds. And so there's no like real path for an artist to reach high levels of success without having some sort of compromise into the sort of gallery and auction world, some sort of soul trade that I see happens there. So I had to scale back the giant paintings and sort of get to a small format, and also tie in all of the things I believe in and all the ideas that I think deserve steam and recognition in the world. And so I started producing these. My most successful product has been these small totems.
Okay, I've seen these now. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah,
Wow.
so these are laser engraved and then hand painted, and then they have the ability to be backed with Bitcoin through open dime single use wallets. And so I've been moving tons of these, which illustrate some of the very important.
Oh my God, is that the Federal Reserve?
It might be plausible deniability. Right?
Okay, got it.
So I've been making those, and then also blanks, like not like, it's not fashion. It's just kind of like prints on t-shirts at this point, because fashion is just so expensive to get into, and you have to do large runs without any sort of guarantee that you'll sell them. But I do all the brand for Bull.
Oh, you do? Got it.
And all the merchandising there. And then now recently I figured that the most important thing that I want to be creating is this jewelry work, which you're not going to be able to see at all.
Yeah, well,
but
the camera focus on it. Yeah. I think I know that though. There's a bull right on there, right? That's like a medallion with the bull logo on it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's about the size of like a €1 coin.
Oh yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
And it's just filled with sort of OPSEC Bitcoin and sovereignty symbolism. And so I'm getting into heavy production of jewel stuff.
Because I feel like that just started, right? Last little while?
Yeah, it just started. I just launched it a month ago. And it'll be sort of the primary. The idea is basically to cash flow the business with jewelry so that I can focus on working on the really giant paintings here. Because those require a huge amount of time and energy, and it's very difficult to find buyers, as I'm extremely obscure at this point. So they're kind of I work on them and I get them finished, but then they sort of sit around for months, years, whatever, until they're able to be sold, because obviously even at the most reasonable cost per square inch, they're still at a range that is difficult for most people to obtain. And art is the most luxury good that you can buy. There's nothing more luxurious than art. So it's a really difficult thing to sell. But what I've noticed is that there's a really good crossover between Bitcoiners and people who really appreciate things that are not from IKEA or mass produced or just crap. There's really a desire in Bitcoin to find good product creators because you're incentivized in Bitcoin to spend as little money as possible. So anything you do spend money on, you really want it to last. It's the complete opposite of this fiat disposable culture where you have money sitting in a bank account that's just melting like ice and going to zero. And so you got to spend it as fast as you can to get it converted into something that can hold value in the physical world. So in that case, you're incentivized to spend very quickly, and you don't really have too much care if you'll have to replace a product into the future. But with Bitcoin, the idea is that every single thing you buy, you want it to last forever, multi-generational, so that you don't have to spend money ever again on that item. So like a table from IKEA or a solid oak table, they may look the same because IKEA designs their tables to look similar, but one will be your grandkids' niece's table that they will inherit, and the other will be in the garbage in your lifetime.
Yes.
And unfortunately, there's a major price difference between these two things because the disposable world has sucked so much of the sales volume away. And so we have this disparity where cheaper stuff is getting cheaper and high quality stuff is getting more and more and more expensive. But this is something that Bitcoin solves just by changing that simple incentive of not wanting to have to re-spend money.
Real estate investing isn't always easy, but it can be relatively simple. And that's where the Rockstar Inner Circle comes in. Look, there's a lot of real estate investing information out there these days. That's why it's so important to pick your sources wisely. And even though investing isn't always going to be the easiest process, it does not have to be super complicated. That's where tried, tested, and proven strategies like the ones that Rockstar members use come into play. Everything shared in the Inner Circle is built from firsthand, on the streets experience in the current market. It's all up to date, things that people are actually implementing today. In fact, the ongoing courses are delivered live, so they're always up to date with the absolute latest real life experiences. As a Rockstar member, get ongoing access to over 20 different systems and programs covering things like which properties investors like and why, our private rental system, what opportunities the investors are scooping up in student housing currently, the legal side of investing, why or how to use corporations as an investor, a mortgage class with the absolute latest options and programs to build your portfolio as an investor because they're different than a regular home buyer. And there's a whole ton more in all those different classes. Of course, to implement all these strategies, members get access to unlimited private one-on-one coaching with an actual human experienced investor, not an AI chatbot, not ChatGPT or anything like that. It goes beyond training classes in real estate. It's a community for people looking to take control of their own finances, to give themselves options and allow them to live life on their terms. With ongoing live and virtual opportunities to connect, it's built for investors by investors. You can see everything members get at rockstarinnercircle.com/member. It's rockstarinnercircle.com/member. Now back to the show.
I'm sitting at a black walnut table, and when you priced this out, my brother and I were like, holy shit, like we couldn't even believe how much it cost. But we had somebody in Hamilton, Ontario create this for us, and it's beautiful. So I can totally relate, because the cost of getting real things is just kind of hidden as like this inflation-based fiat system just creates, like you're saying, cheaper goods that have been created with cheap labor, kind of disguising the problem. It's just, the whole thing's a bit of a farce. Not a bit of a farce. It's a huge farce. So in the Madex Manifesto, the video you have on YouTube, like great work with that, by the way, you use the words siren call of mediocrity, compromised visions. Like, this to me resonates with me personally, but I think with a bunch of people. What are you trying to say here when you say this siren call of mediocrity? Like, today's world is what are you communicating here?
I mean, just going on what we were just talking about, it's so much easier and tempting to spend money on something that is cheaper versus something that will last forever. So you have a quick solution to your problem, but you're going to have the same problem again very quickly. And this sort of plays out to everything. It's like every decision that you can make in the short term, to eat a whole bunch of Cheetos and to go to the seed oil restaurants and load up on seed oil crap and just totally inflame your body and destroy your body's ability to handle sort of basic tasks just by eating crap, versus the difficult path of finding a local rancher that you can trust, that you can get high quality beef from, building an economy or building a community around you that can supply access to healthy and food that is created outside of the industrial sludge complex. One is a very, very difficult way of living, and the other is a very convenient, tempting, heavily marketed, and heavily lied about area. And so you have a much easier choice to go and eat trash food. And so in the short term, you get the solution of thinking you are nourished, but in the long term, you're destroying your body over time. And then this can go into sort of the Bitcoin world, where you have the hard path of that we take at Bull Bitcoin of creating extremely capable, functional, useful tools and providing a actually needed service to the market, versus creating some sort of scam token and raising and riding money off of a whole bunch of puff with no intentions of actually accomplishing anything. You got one side that VC loves, which can make a lot of money very quickly, and then you got another side that actually contributes to society continuing, but is much more difficult and much harder to sell. So this sort of layout can be applied to really everything. And I guess the main thing is that right now in fiat society that we have right now with central banks and money printing, lying and treachery is rewarded, and honor and nobility is punished. It is only the cheats that can really get super far ahead in the fiat world, just because there is so much. There's scams are just so readily acceptable in this world, and to actually produce something of value and make a contribution to the world is not valued properly, just because of the infinity money that is pouring out of the central banks, and the quick cash opportunities around that. So a great example of this is that how money is supposed to work is that the most valuable people to society, to civilization, are rewarded the highest. So if your creation, if your invention, if your work saves people time, if it gives people comfort, if it really makes a contribution to quality of life, if it helps people accomplish their own missions, that's where the reward is supposed to go. But in the fiat world, the highest reward goes to paper traders, the investment bankers, the hedge fund guys, the just people who are manipulating and passing around the labor of others for their own personal gain. They're celebrated because that's just how the system has been rigged for them to have access to extreme profits while overlooking the people who actually provide a value. And I mean, obviously there's examples that you can find, that thwart this, but for the most part, we look down on the plumber and we idolize the $5,000 suit wearing investment banker just because of a capital measurement, but really one does nothing and the other ensures that you have a certain standard and quality of life. So it's just completely backwards from that fiat system about on who we should be celebrating. And yeah, I guess hard money really helps you sort of identify those people who do contribute value and ensure that they're taken care of. And the sort of fiat liars and wasters of human time, they cannot survive on a Bitcoin standard.
Funny, I see it like when I hear you speak, and then I see what Francis is doing and the entire Bull Bitcoin team and how great everybody is at Bull. And then I see people like Jeff Booth, where he's spending his time. And I was at Cheat Code, the conference, and at the football game on day 2 of that, just running into just young guys who are like talking Austrian economics, like that I would never expect to be having conversations at the side of a football pitch about Austrian economics, and they're traveling the world. I feel like there's a small but growing, powerful group of you who are going around the world, and it's like there's like a spark that has started, and there's this kind of spirit in all of you who I would say is very inspirational to those of us who maybe have not completely seen what's going on yet, or are not completely living as a sovereign individual themselves. And you're kind of giving a bit of energy or purpose or hope to a bunch of people around you. And I think you're aware of that, but maybe on some days you're not fully aware that that's what you're doing. Because like, if I was to put on a t-shirt created by you, that is much more meaningful to me than putting on any other t-shirt, because of what you stand for. And I feel like I want people to know that. And that's why I'm wearing your t-shirt. Like, I know it might be like, I'm just saying maybe some shit that's not well crafted.
Right. That's correct.
Here, but yeah. So like, it's interesting to me, and you're all very different. Like when I think of Jeff Booth, very different than you, because he's very analytical and very detailed on some of the economic principles and technology. Not that you don't understand economics, you clearly do, but the way you're communicating it out in the form of art, it's like, this is very powerful. And then what Francis is doing, taking some of this stuff and creating Bull Bitcoin, you can kind of extrapolate forward 10 years. And I'm like, man, this is pretty cool. Like, I like where all this is headed. Where do you think either Canada or the world is headed in the next few years? Like, how do you see this fiat system evolving over the next little bit? I don't know, just like randomly. Not that maybe you don't even care completely. I'm just curious as to your thoughts.
Well, we have there's going to be a big wrestle ahead of us. But I know that we'll come out victorious in the end. It's that famous, the famous cycle, which is, am I going to get this right? It's I
know what
strong men,
yeah.
good times create weak men create hard times create strong men. So I think we're really in the hard times part. It's starting to accelerate. And I think that without Bitcoin, we would really be heading for a really dark place, because Bitcoin is a financier to people who seek sovereignty, and it creates wealthy libertarians and wealthy people who have a really good understanding of all the horrible mistakes that have been made. Because the only reason, even now, the only reason that you would consider Bitcoin as something that you absolutely must have is if you're smart enough to see the destruction and devastation and understand the root of it. And that sort of noticing has a big reach in people who want to make their own decisions, and people who believe, rightfully 100% rightfully believe, that the individual decisions of individual participants within a system are more intelligent exponentially than a single individual making a sweeping decision for a set of people. So we have this sort of selection to Bitcoin, which is really great, which is in the future over time. Bitcoin becomes your financier, which allows you to push your view and your value into the world. And people who reject Bitcoin currently are either so comfortable in the fiat system, they're at a high enough level that they just don't care, because they're just able to, through paper trading or whatever other bizarre means, make insane amounts of money. And so the prospect of Bitcoin going up 100x doesn't matter to them, because from the moment you started talking about Bitcoin to them, they made, $10,000 just in that like 3 minutes that you were talking to them. So they just don't care. They got their own system that's working, and that's that. And then people who are just completely unaware that a really serious problem exists, and that cannot see the theft on a large scale, and they see all the problems, but they don't have really a right director of their symptoms and that are a right explanation of all the symptoms. And the government has done an extremely good job at blaming the free marketeer, the capitalist, for all of the horrors, when really it's their own work that has caused all of it. Most people who are anti-capitalist, they reference, oh, well, back in the day, people took advantage of the labor forces, and because of that, capitalism is evil. But what they don't see is that it was only regulation and collusion that gave those corporations the ability to take advantage of the workforce. And that regulation and collusion was in partnership with the state. In a free market, those sorts of problems just don't exist. It is regulation that creates monopolies. It is collusion that creates monopolies. The free market, you cannot maintain a monopoly no matter how good you are in a true free market. So I haven't had enough pastis, so I think we got to route this back to where I started, and I can loop it back in. I should be taking notes.
No, you're doing great. I wonder that, like, with everything that you're saying, like, I guess something crossed my mind. I'm like, because I think I've heard you talk about Alberta before, and that your views kind of on Alberta and Canada briefly. But I'm just wondering if there's some wealth transfer that happens to people who get onto the Bitcoin, train, and the wealth that accumulates to some Bitcoiners, if they are true libertarians. I wonder if it's like a certain kind of network or group of people that all kind of are holding their own passport and are all considering themselves citizens of like a Bitcoin state. And it doesn't matter if you're in Alberta or where you are. Yeah. It's like everybody's kind of on the same, they have enough.
The major unplug from the fucking, like, how do you, like the cord pull that we see in the Matrix movie, all that is setting up a Bitcoin wallet. Like how, when you asked me at the beginning of this, how do you define yourself as a sovereign individual?
Yeah.
Because I have a Bitcoin wallet. And there's not a person on this fucking earth that can fuck with that without the use of violence, which completely changes the stakes of the game. As my friend Dave Bradley says, fiat separates the theft, the robber, from the person who is being robbed. But when you're on a Bitcoin standard, a hard money standard, somebody has to look you in the eye and take the wealth. It has to be a direct exchange. There's no phantom way of doing it, which is currently inflation. So the Bank of Canada can reach into every single Canadian's bank account and take whatever the fuck they want out of that account, with the account holder not even noticing, not even realizing. It is a highly sophisticated Pink Panther level of theft. And Bitcoin just stops this. Like I try to simplify things when I'm talking to people. I don't pitch Bitcoin very often anymore, but when I am, one of the main simplifications is it just stops the theft. It doesn't change human nature. It doesn't change that fucked up stuff will happen. It doesn't change anything about human beings. All it changes is that the credit system that we measure each other off of and that we use to determine who decides how time and resources are allocated is fair. That's really the only difference. There's not someone able to cheat. And once you kick the fucking cheaters off of the board, the whole game changes. And it won't stop horrible things from happening, and it won't stop scams and large scale collusions and all sorts, but it makes it much harder. It makes it much harder because Bitcoin provides consequences for decisions. On a fiat system, there's no consequences. If the government of Canada makes a horrific financial mistake, just paper over it.
Socialize it. Yeah.
Yeah, just paper over it, right? The plebs will cover our mistakes, and thus we can make no mistakes because we don't care or have any respect for the people who drive the entire motor of the world. But in the Bitcoin world, you can't fucking print money. So if you make a mistake, you go fucking broke. You go bankrupt. You're done. And every formulation of government has to have consequences for their decisions. And right now we just live in a completely total consequence-free world. Everywhere that has a central bank, there's no consequences to huge mistakes, except for people who aren't in the club. People who are not in the club, they're the ones who have to suffer the consequences, not only for themselves and their personal decisions, but also for the entire country. And that's not fair. And that is no ground to civilization at all. And that's the major thing that Bitcoin will change, and why if you don't know about Bitcoin, you don't care about Bitcoin, you've never taken it seriously, look around at the people involved in it and realize that the killer app is that they and I will give our lives for the success of this fucking fair game. Ups, downs, like there's nobody, there's not a person I know in Bitcoin that hasn't lost inconceivable wealth by either making huge mistakes, fucking up coins, making bad investments, that buying something stupid. There's nobody I know that has had some sort of horrific trauma experience with Bitcoin. And yet we're all still all in, working forward, building, creating, trying to make it more accessible, trying to get the messages out, trying to explain how serious and how gravitous all of this is. I don't think there's anything in the world that you can experience huge amounts of loss and suffering in and still be willing to die for it.
Mm. Yeah, so well said. I think that's what got it, like some of the smartest people that I meet. That's why I can't really talk myself out of Bitcoin. It's like when you start going down the rabbit hole, you're like, holy shit, these people are so smart in all different capacities. And the further you go down the rabbit hole, I think I was trying to talk myself out of it for a while. Like, what am I missing? Like, this is not what I think it is. And then you realize it's so much more, and that Bitcoin literally changes the whole world. Like, Bitcoin changes everything. And I think when you say that, people think, oh, like, this guy's fucking bullshitting. But you're like, no, like, the world kind of morphs to what Bitcoin is, and it's truth. It's a measuring stick that no one can cheat. It's what you're saying. Like, it's basic capitalism, like form capital, do something of value into the economy, so much so that you get some capital. You've earned the capital by producing something of value, and you've earned maybe a little bit extra that you can then save. And then your savings, they go up in value. And if you want to take a risk with those savings, you can deploy them back into the economy and build a business. But that business better grow in value more than the savings themselves. So the business has to be a freaking really good business. And then we get the good tables and the good bull Bitcoins of the world and these great businesses that are producing value back into the world. It's like everything's leveled up. Whereas right now, when I look around, I'm like, especially for some of the big financial institutions, it's so easy for them to get quote unquote capital, which is just bullshit debt that they deploy out into the world. And it's why all our tables are shit. It's why the housing market is so shit. It's why everything is just shit. And then people are kind of wallowing around in this and they don't understand why their lives are kind of dull. And it's meeting someone like you. It's why you're so interesting to me. It's like, wow, you're yet another person who's figured it out from a completely different angle. And sometimes I try to tell some of my friends, I'm like, read these books or check this out, and it falls on deaf ears a lot of times. So I think that's why it's so important that you just continue doing what you're doing, because you share the message in a very different way than I'll share the message. Anyway, kind of just feel honored to cross paths with you. You're an interesting guy, really interesting guy. And you're creative. I don't have a creative bone in my body. So to meet someone like you is really inspirational for me. I just have a couple more questions. I just want to wrap up maybe a couple rapid fire questions. Like if you met somebody, I don't know, of any age, do you have like 2 or 3 books that you would tell them to read? I know you said you kind of given up on trying to convert people to think about Bitcoin or whatever, but are there 2 or 3 books that you're like, oh my gosh, you got to read this? Like maybe The Sovereign Individual would be one, or any. Is there something that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think I'll just say that the reason that I haven't given up, I just am really selective with who I'll talk to.
Sure. Yeah. Well, your time is precious. Yeah.
Because it's just the biggest thing I notice is that people don't understand the problem in the first place. And Bitcoin is a solution. Everything about Bitcoin is a solution. And if whoever you're talking to doesn't have a grasp on the fucking problem, then you're just wasting your time in the first place, because it's just like, why are you selling me this solution to problems that don't exist?
Well, what you said makes so much sense, because I have some friends who do very, very well financially. So when you said every 10 minutes they're making another $10,000, or the example you used, it's hard to get through the problem to them because they're not feeling any problem. You know what I mean? So it's like they don't understand.
Dave has a great line recently, which is to guys like that is, man, if you don't start buying Bitcoin soon, I'm going to have more money than you.
Yeah. The competitive juices then get flowing. Yeah. That'll stun them for sure. Okay. But so 2 or 3 books, a book. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't like, fuck, there's so many really.
I know.
What's formulated to me is so many. For a Bitcoin book, I think that the fiat standard from Saifedean is more important than the Bitcoin standard exponentially, for that same reason I touched on, which is that if you don't understand the fucking problem, then Bitcoin is never going to make sense to you, and you're just going to be left in the dust. You'll just never get it until it's too late, and that's fine. We say everybody gets Bitcoin at the price they deserve. But fiat standard from Saifedean really illustrates how the fiat banking system works, how credit is created, the Mandrake mechanism from the Federal Reserve, the printing money out of thin air, all the sort of, and also has some chapters that kind of give some examples of how this has an effect on our civilization. So the fiat standard is a good one for Bitcoin because it talks about fucking fiat. And for outside of that, what would I say? A pairing that goes really well together is a book called Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson with Sovereign Individual. Sovereign Individual is sort of the analytical version, and Snow Crash is sort of the dramatized story version.
Okay, because I've heard of Snow Crash. I've never read it. It's a fictional story on these principles, maybe? Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's a very early fictional story. It's a book that created a lot of, it's the reason that Facebook changed its name to Meta. It's a very early computer book that laid out a lot of terminology that we ended up embracing. But it's a description, it's like a fun story description of the world that Sovereign Individual sort of outlines. So that's a great pairing.
What about the principles you live by? Do you have a set of principles you live by?
Yeah, I just, within my ability, I try to do what I think is right. And I think that is programmed into us. It's not, it's sort of like this unspoken code. And, we have laws and all sorts of things, but I think there is a engraved into our DNA code of being good in the world, and obviously not everybody has that. But I think the environment that I was fortunate enough to came out definitely instilled it. But I've kind of I think that no matter what, what's right and what's wrong in your soul, and you can make decisions in favor of that or outside of the favor of it. Something might be legal, but it might not be right. So I don't know. And then principle wise, I just try to support my family, my friends, the people around me. As a person who's ended up in this position, I cannot tell you how much variations of bullying I went through in my journey. And so I'm always very supportive to anyone who has like a really great talent and is kind of taking a risk into an area that may not be advisable. And especially for like younger kids that I meet, I really have a belief in, like, when you're very young, sort of where we've ended up is that, it's critically important to go to school, but there are a major thing I learned is that I did a shitload of business stuff and then was also taking entrepreneurial risks while other friends of mine went to business school. And when they graduated, they were calling me for advice. And I didn't go to fucking business school. I just got wrecked over and over and over again.
You learned in the real world
for years, failing with, the experience of capital loss, and then ended up kind of being an advisor to a lot of them. So I think just whatever it is that you're naturally good at is what you got to put the most effort and focus into, and find a way to be able to make that your life. Because otherwise, I don't think it's possible to be happy unless you're doing something that you love. My uncle said something really great. He said, the main priority of life is to never work a day ever in your life. And I've managed to never work for 40 years. And of course, he has worked fucking hard over the last 40 years, but he worked with boats and with sailing, and the work was never work for him because it was something, he really cared about and enjoyed doing. And I think no matter what it is, your skill is, you can find work that you enjoy, and also that there is definitely a lot of propaganda that's causing people to kind of be unhappy when they shouldn't really be. But I don't know, what you enjoy, and whatever that is, that's what you should gear your life towards.
Where do people find what's the website? Like, where do people go to find your art? Where do you have it displayed? Do you have it displayed physically somewhere? Is it the website? Where do people go to buy it?
Yeah. So to see it physically, there's a distribution center in Calgary, Alberta, and the flagship gallery for Madex is being set up in Nashville, Tennessee right now.
No way.
So if you're in Nashville, Tennessee, you can make an appointment and see the gallery there. That should be live in about a month here. And then other than that, I'm online on Twitter at SpaceBull, like outer space, and Bull Bitcoin. And then my website is Madex, Madex.art. And that's sort of the primary. I'm on Nostr too. I'm trying to build like a much stronger Nostr following, and that's been going pretty well. Nostr is definitely the future of social media. For anyone who doesn't know, it's a uncensorable sort of version of Twitter. So it's Twitter, except nobody can be blocked, shut down, or fucked with. and whatever you post on there is eternal. It just exists. It's similar to BitTorrent or to Bitcoin. The social media content is spread out around self-hosted servers over the earth, and that's where all the content lays. So impossible to censor, and
no one's gonna fuck with you. I think I just had this flash. I think you shared an image of you standing naked somewhere. Desert? Was it the desert? I forget.
Yeah.
And I was just like, who? Yeah, and I obviously don't know you. I'm like, whoever this fucking guy is, like, no one. He doesn't give two shits. You know, he's gonna do what he's gonna do. And then I think I saw it again where you're in the background. Was it at a conference, or was that like, did somebody do that
at BTC Prague?
A BTC.
Yeah, that's the other place you can see me live. Like, if you want to see the Madex experience live, it'll be Bitcoin Prague, BTC Prague 2025. I have a massive installation there.
Awesome.
Part of the design and layout for the whole event. Last year,
that's because the organizers just, you guys get along and they wanted to incorporate you right into the event? That's how that happened?
Yeah, they get it. And so last year we did the first version of it. And for 2025, I mean, this year I was supposed to go to 20 different events. Unfortunately, I broke my foot skiing, so I didn't make it to all of them. The year before that, I think I did 22 different events.
Oh, wow.
And then next year, I'm doing no events. I'm only putting all of my energy and focus into BTC Prague.
When is BTC Prague? What are the dates for that?
I believe it's mid-June.
Mid-June, okay.
And Prague is just such an incredible city. It was never bombed in the wars, and so it's got all the original buildings, and they lived through extremely hardcore communism until 1994. And so the people there, they have a constitutional conceal and carry right, which is very rare in Europe.
Yeah.
And the people there generally have a very real understanding of communism means no restaurants exist except for approved restaurants. No music exists except for approved music. No culture or art exists except for approved culture and arts. And thus, they are people who are very prone to Bitcoin. Some of the most important developments in Bitcoin history came out of Prague over the last 16 years. And it's just really a great place. So I'm really honored to be partnered with them. The official dates are June 19th to 21st. And if you're looking for a reason to fly to one of the most beautiful fucking cities in Europe and be around people who are far from what the American stereotype of a European is, it's a really excellent place.
Yeah, when I've been to some other conferences, everyone said, I had a few people pull me aside and they're like, you got to go to BTC Prague. Like, if you like this stuff, you got to go to, and I thought, oh, isn't BTC Prague like just a really big event? I don't really want to go to a big event, but they said somehow, even though it's grown, like the value out of BTC Prague is massive, that it didn't feel like a big event, that there was real good stuff happening there. So that was
they're very strict. There's no crypto bullshit there. Everyone who's involved is dedicated to Bitcoin. And that's something that is impossible to find these days.
Yeah. Madex. And then the Madex manifesto is on YouTube. I'm going to put that in the show notes of this episode. So if you're listening to this and you want to learn more about this guy that you're listening to right here, I'm going to put the Madex manifesto link on the show notes for this. And I feel like we're clearly different people. I'm more like a I'm more like a geek on the economy and stuff. And you actually have creative talent. Like, you actually can produce like beautiful things where I can't. So I really kind of look up to you in that way and kind of admire the stuff that you're able to do, because to me, it just seems like so skillful. Like I can't do any of that stuff. Like, I can barely draw a stick figure. So for you to do that kind of stuff is pretty inspirational.
Both skills are incredibly important, because for myself on the project management side of things, I am not as skilled. So I'd like to say
You're a true artist.
Yeah, I'm hiring a full-time project manager for Madex currently.
Oh, cool.
And looking for someone that is either in Alberta or would come to Alberta to work with Madex and help convert it from the insane artistic startup that it is into a future Hermes or Prada sort of business.
Yeah, very cool. A pleasure to cross paths like this. I can't wait to like shake your hand in person. So Madex, thank you for doing this. If anyone's listening to this, we're gonna have links to everything Madex just said in the show notes, and to Nostr. I guess the Nostr will put your public key in the show notes. So we'll do stuff like that. And yeah, thank you. Or really appreciate you doing this. You didn't have to do this. You don't know us. So really, thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Tom. It's really important to me as well to reach new audiences. And the only way I survive is by finding new clients that can really take value out of the work I'm doing. So I'm really grateful to be here as well. And it's also great to sort of have a conversation that is outside of a lot of the things that I'm normally forced to talk about. So it's been great, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you.